Today we're going to be crocheting some really cute mittens with that gorgeous wheat stitch that I came up with. And these are made flat. So it's a fun project to do, but it is intermediate where we're using different styles of stitches as well as increasing and decreasing on one side. So for today's pattern, I have chosen to use two different yarns. The reason why is I want to talk about what it means when you change brands of yarns, even though they're labeled the same. So both of these are labeled a medium 4 worsted weight yarn. But when I work with the Color Theory yarn, I end up using a 4.5 millimeter crochet hook. And when I work with the worsted Heather's yarn from Hirschner's, I'm using a 4 millimeter crochet hook. And that's what helps this size the same. So we want to make sure the sizing is correct. Even though I'm using different crochet hooks, that is how it works out. So even when you're doing substitutes, you need to do gauge swatches. You need to watch your stitches and make sure that they're working up the way you want with something that is fitted. Now you have some wiggle room in mittens, but we don't have, a ton of wiggle room. We don't want to go make a child size mitten and have it fit an adult. So on camera today, I am going to be using the Hirschner's worsted with the 4 millimeter hook, but I also am making a set in the Color Theory using the 4.5 millimeter to match that gauge. I also have a pair of scissors to cut those ends, stitch markers to keep track of my rows, which is so smart, and then a yarn needle to weave in those ends. This comes in several different sizes. I'm going to be making this size on camera today for a little one. Each of these has a longer cuff that can flip up. That way it's extra warmth around the wrist. And then if you want, you can leave it like this to put on their coats so that it's a bit warmer underneath their coat cuff. They are super warm with these wheat stitches and cozy to wear. The baby size does not have thumbs because babies and thumbs do not work when you're trying to shove them into mittens. So it's just without the thumb because that's more functional. And then I want to talk about construction here. So when it comes to constructing these, we are doing them flat. So this is the size of mitten we're working on today. I'm going to be making the pair to this, but this is what it looks like once we have crocheted it before we fold and join. So this is the mitten. I know it looks odd that this turns into this, but all we do is fold it over. And then we're going to be seaming along these edges, and that's what creates it into that really cute mitten. So let's go ahead and get started. No matter what size you're using, it'll be a different stitch count and a different row count, but the concepts will still all apply. Today on camera, I will be demonstrating the toddler or preschool size. It's kind of in between there, depending on the size of your child's hands. And this instruction will apply to all of the sizes. So we're going to be taking the same steps. It's just going to be different stitch counts and different row counts. So I have placed a slip knot onto my hook. I am using the 4 millimeter for this because I'm using that Hirschner's yarn. That ends up needing to switch hooks to keep my gauge compared to that Color Theory yarn. So never be afraid to test that. For row 1, I'm going to start by chaining 33 chains. Now after chaining 33, we are going to single crochet into that second chain from the hook. I like to work in these bottom humps. So we're going to single crochet in the second chain from the hook. Always a good idea to mark that first stitch of this row just so we make sure we keep our stitch counts correct. And then we will single crochet in each remaining chain across. At the end of row 1 for the size, we will have a total of 32 stitches. Now after row 1, we are going to turn our work and chain 1, and then we're going to single crochet into the back loop only for 18 stitches. Now if you've never worked in the back loop only, what you're going to do is you're going to identify the top of the stitch. We see we have a V. And normally we would go through both of those stitches that make up that V, but we're not. We're going to go through the loop on the back only. So we're not going to do this front loop. We're just going to go into that back loop. And we're going to single crochet in the first 18 stitches of this row in the back loop. Now after single crocheting 18, we're going to start what is this modified puff stitch repeat. How this works is we are going to skip the next stitch and single crochet into the next. And now we're going to go back to that skipped stitch, and we're going to yarn over, insert into that skipped stitch, yarn over, and pull up a loop. yarn over again, insert into the same skip stitch, yarn over, and pull up a loop. We'll want to pull up these loops as high as the first loop on our hook so that they have a nice height to them. Now we have 5 loops on our hook, and we are going to yarn over and pull through the first 4 loops on the hook, and then yarn over and pull through the remaining 2. Now that is the repeat we are going to be working here until the last 2 stitches of this row. So once again, that's to skip the next stitch and single crochet into the next. Going back to that skip stitch, we will do a modified puff stitch. And then we're going to keep repeating those 2 steps. Skip a stitch and single crochet. Working back into that skip stitch, we're going to do a puff stitch. Keep doing that until the last 2 stitches of this row. Now that we are to the last 2 stitches in the row, I'm going to remove my stitch marker here. So 2 stitches left, and we are going to single crochet into the next. And then for this last stitch in the row, we are going to work 2 single crochet stitches. And we've increased by 1. So our total stitch count for row 2 now is 33 stitches. And we're going to turn our work. And this is where we're working on the thumb portion of this mitten. And for the first 2 stitches of this row, we are going to chain 1 and then work those 2 stitches as a single crochet decrease. So we'll single crochet 2 together. And then we are going to be working down the rest of this thumb and down what we can kind of see now is going to be the cuff. So now we are going to keep single crocheting in the back loop only. So we'll just single crochet in the back loop only for every stitch remaining across. And because we decreased at the first of this row, we are working with 32 stitches again at the end of this row. Now we just completed this portion of the mitten. This is the first thumb. And now we're going to work on going to this body portion. And you'll notice that we're splitting right here. So we're going to be working row 1 of the body portion and leaving some of the thumb unworked and doing some foundation stitches, some foundation single crochets in order to build this up so that we can work this section here. So let's do that together. So for this size, for this toddler size, we're going to chain 1 and we've turned our work and we're going to back loop only single crochet in the first 25 stitches. So single crochet, back loop only, 25 stitches. Okay, we've worked 25 single crochet stitches in the back loop, and now we're going to do 12 foundation single crochets. We're leaving these remaining stitches unworked, and now we're going to work some foundation stitches. To get started on working foundation stitches, we're going to go to our last stitch that we just worked, and we're going to enter this left bar here. This is the best way I found to do it. Yarn over and pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2. So we've just created our first foundation stitch, kind of using the previous stitch to help us out a little bit there. Now we're going to enter that bar again. So we're going to then yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. And that's a foundation single crochet. So go back into that far left bar, yarn over and pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through 2. And notice it's creating nice stitches along this edge for us that we can work into on this next row. So we'll want to do a total of 12 foundation single crochet stitches, and that will bring the stitch count to a total of 37 stitches for this row 1 of the body portion. All right, so after completing row 1 of the body, we're going to turn our work and we're going to be working back down this row. We're going to start by chaining 1 and then single crocheting 2 into this very first stitch. So we're doing an increase here, and you'll want to grab a stitch marker. Trust me, when you use a stitch marker on this increasing or decreasing edge as we're shaping this, it makes life so much easier. So now we've done 2 single crochets in the first, and we're going to be working that wheat modified puff stitch all the way across until we get to the last 18 stitches of this row where we will be working that ribbing. So we're going to skip a stitch, single crochet into the next. Going back to that skip stitch, we will work that modified puff. Now, I do want to mention that as you work this, it's a little bit fickly on this very first row because we're working into such a small amount of fabric. We just got this one foundation stitches here. It's going to feel a little bit awkward, but this will be the only row that's going to feel that way. It will get easier as we get more fabric. So just work as intentionally as you can. You don't need to rush it. We're just gonna work those puff stitch repeats until we get to the last 18 stitches of the row. And that's to skip a stitch, single crochet, go back to that skip stitch and work a modified puff stitch. So work those steps until the last 18 stitches of this row. Now that we've worked that until the last 18 stitches, we will single crochet in the back loop only for the remaining 18 stitches of this row. Now for this row, we will have a total of 38 stitches at the end because we did an increase when we started. Now for row 3 of the body, we're going to turn our work and chain 1, and we will start by single crocheting in the first 18 stitches of this row. Now after single crocheting in the first 18, we are going to be working that puff stitch repeat until the last 2 stitches of this row. So we're going to do that same instructions we've done before, where we will skip 1 and single crochet, and then working back into that skip stitch, we will puff stitch and work that until you have 2 stitches remaining in this row. Now that we have 2 stitches remaining, we're going to single crochet into the next stitch and then move our stitch marker and work 2 single crochet stitches into the last. So we have increased on the edge here again, which means we have a total of 39 stitches for row 3. Now we're ready to turn our work and work row 4. And for row 4, we are going to chain 1 and single crochet in the back loop only for each stitch across. No increasing on this one, just working that single crochet stitch. I still like to mark the first stitch of the row, but single crochet in the back loop only all the way across for all those stitches. Now that we are finished with row 4, we will turn our work. For row 5, we're going to start by chaining 1, and then we are going to single crochet into each stitch across until the last 2 stitches of this row. So single crocheting in the back loop only for each stitch across until the last 2 stitches of row 5 of the body. Now that we've worked across until the last 2 stitches, I'm going to remove my stitch marker here, and we are going to single crochet 2 together for the last 2 stitches of this row, which means at the end of row 5, we have decreased to 38 stitches. Now we're going to turn our work and start row 6. For row 6, we will chain 1, and then we're going to single crochet 2 together at the beginning of row 6. Be sure to mark that stitch. Now we're going to be working our puff stitch repeat until the last 18 stitches of this row. So starting by skipping a stitch and going back and working that puff stitch. We're going to work that repeat until we get to the last 18 stitches of this row. And then when you get to the last 18 stitches, you will single crochet in the back loop only for the last 18 stitches of row 6. At the end of row 6, we will have a total of 37 stitches. Now for row 7, we're going to turn our work and chain 1. And we're going to single crochet in the back loop only for the first 18 stitches of row 7. Now that we've single crocheted in the first 18 in the back loop only, we are going to start that puff repeat again. We're going to work it until we get to the last 3 stitches of row 7. So we're going to be working those puff stitches. It's nice at this point to see, we can see how those are going to start to look. We're going to work that repeat until the last 3 stitches of row 7. Now that we are to the last 3 stitches, we will single crochet into the next and then remove our stitch marker, and for the last 2 stitches we will single crochet 2 together to complete row 7, which brings us to a stitch count of 36 stitches. Now we're going to turn our work and we're going to work row 8. We're going to start by chaining 1, and then we are going to single crochet 2 together at the beginning of row 8, mark that very first stitch of this row. And then we are going to single crochet into the back loop only for the remaining stitches across. And at the end of row 8, we will have a total of 35 stitches. And now for row 9, we're going to turn our work, chain 1, and single crochet in the back loop only for every stitch across. And for row 9, we are not decreasing, so the stitch count will remain 35 stitches for row 9. Now we're going to turn our work and start row 10. We're going to chain 1. And for row 10, we are going to do 2 single crochet stitches into that very first stitch. And this is an increase. Grab your stitch marker, save your sanity, and mark the first stitch of the row. And now we're going to be working that puff stitch repeat until the last 18 stitches of this row. So we're going to skip a stitch, single crochet, working back into that skip stitch, that puff stitch. Work those 2 stitches until you get to the last 18 stitches of row 10. And in those last 18 stitches, I just lost that stitch there. In those last 18 stitches, I'm sure you can guess it, we will be single crocheting in the back loop only for the last 18. Now, row 10 we increased, so at the end of row 10, you will have a total of 36 stitches. Now for row 11, we're going to turn our work, chain 1, and work the first 18 stitches of this row as single crochet in the back loop only. Now after working the first 18 stitches, we are going to be doing that puff stitch repeat, and we're going to work that until the last 2 stitches of row 11. So do that puff stitch repeat until the last 2 stitches of this row. All right, for the last 2 stitches of row 11, we will single crochet into the next, move our stitch marker, and then do 2 single crochets into that last stitch. Now we've increased to 37 stitches for row 11. Now we're going to turn our work and work row 12. Now for row 12, we're going to chain 1, do 2 single crochet stitches into that first stitch, marking that first stitch of this row. And now we're going to single crochet in the back loop only for the remaining stitches across. And for row 12, with that increase, it brings the stitch count to a total of 38 stitches for row 12. All right, now for row 13, we're going to turn our work. We are going to chain 1, and we will single crochet in the back loop only all the way across until we get to the last stitch in this row. And now that we are to the last stitch of row 13, we will remove that stitch marker and single crochet 2 stitches into that last stitch, which brings this row to 39 stitches. Then we're going to turn our work to start row 14, chain 1, and for row 14, we're going to start with a single crochet, 2 together, placing that stitch marker at that first stitch of row 14. And then we are going to single crochet 1. And now we're going to start that puff stitch repeat where we skip the next stitch and single crochet in the next and do that puff stitch. And we will do that all the way until the last 18 stitches of this row. And the last 18 stitches we will work as single crochet in the back loop only. And at the end of row 14, you will have a total of 38 stitches. And now I'm going to turn after row 14, and row 14 stitch count was 38. And now for row 15, we are going to start with a chain 1 and single crochet in that back loop only for the first 18 stitches. Now for row 15, after working those first 18 stitches and the single crochet in the back loop only, we're going to work that puff stitch repeat until we get to the last 2 stitches of this row. And for the last 2 stitches, we are going to single crochet 2 together, which means at the end of row 15, we have a total of 37 stitches. Now for row 16, we're going to turn our work and chain 1, and then we're going to single crochet 2 together. Go ahead and place that stitch marker just so you can count the stitches of this row correctly. And then we are going to back loop only, single crochet in each stitch across. And this means that we will have a total of 36 stitches. And this is going to be the last row of our body for this size of mitten. So now we are moving on to the last thumb section. So we are almost done with this, but we need to mimic what we did on this side. So we are going to start row 1 of this thumb section by chaining 1, and then we are going to single crochet in the back loop only 25, and then we're going to stop. We're going to leave the remaining stitches unworked. So single crochet in the back loop only for 25 stitches, and then we're going to talk about doing some foundation single crochets again. So after single crocheting 25 in the back loop only, we are going to do 7 foundation stitches. And so here's how we do that again. We're going to go to that left bar of the stitch we just worked, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. And then we're going to do that for a total of 7 foundation single crochets, going through that left bar, pulling up a loop, yarn over and pulling through 2. And at the end of this row, including all the stitches with the foundations and the first 25 that we did in the back loop only, we will have a total of 32 stitches for this row 1 of this second thumb section. Now we're going to go ahead and turn our work and start row 2. We'll start with a chain 1, and then we will 2 single crochet into the very first stitch. And then we're going to single crochet into the next. But of course, take this opportunity to grab that stitch marker and put it into the very first stitch of this row, of the row 2. Now we're going to be working those puff stitches until the last 18 stitches of this row, where we will work the single crochet in the back loop only. So we'll do the skip a stitch, go back to the skip stitch and do that puff stitch. And once again, this is where it's a little bit fickly for just a few stitches here where we aren't working into much fabric. So take your time to not get frustrated. Really look at the stitches that you're going to be working into, and just take your time across these stitches. They are a little bit fickly when you're just trying to hold a small piece of fabric and see that skip stitch on a smaller piece of fabric and also pull up that loop. So just take your time across these. We're almost to the finish line here. And work those until the last 18 stitches and single crochet in the back loop for 18. All right, we're on our last row here. We are going to turn our work and chain 1. And then we are going to single crochet in the back loop only until we get to the last 2 stitches of this row. And if I didn't mention it on the previous row for row 2, we ended that row with 33 stitches. And now that we are coming to our last 2 stitches, we are going to remove our stitch marker, and we are going to single crochet into those last 2 stitches of the row. We're going to single crochet them together. So we decrease by 1, which means we have 32 stitches. And guess what? We are done with that part. Look at that. We are ready to join this so that it can look like this. Now that we have finished our last row, for this size we are going to fasten off and weave in that end, and then we're going to do seaming next. So go ahead and grab your yarn needle, weave in ends. Now if you still have that beginning end, go ahead and weave that in. All right, so this does have a right and wrong side. However, it can also be personal preference. So you decide what is the right and the wrong side. So for me, I like having these ridges of the single crochet face out. No matter what you choose, be sure to do the same for both mittens. We want them to match. So I am going to fold these with the right side facing out, just like I have done here, but notice they're reversible, so it doesn't matter if it's right or left hand that you're going to wear it on. And then we're going to grab our yarn and we are going to attach down here at the bottom. We are going to be going through the front loop of the row closest to us and the back loop of the row farthest away. So we've inserted through the front loop of the row closest to us and the back loop of the row farthest away. Now I'm going to yarn over and pull that through and do a slip stitch to get started with that first stitch. Now we're going to go to the next one. So front loop, back loop, slip stitch. The front loop, the back loop, and slip stitch. We're going to do this all the way up to the side, and I'm going to come back when we get to the top of the thumb where it's a little bit, you know, we can't see our stitches. So it's a little bit fickly, but not bad. But we don't have defined stitches to work into. But if you can see where we're headed here, we're going to be slip stitching up the side, around the thumb, back down the thumb, and then up and around the hand portion until this point where it's already joined. All right, now that we're working around the thumbs, you're just going to insert along the edges of the fabric closest to you. And if I can get through any loop here, it looks like I did my edges a little tight. And then we're going to go through the edge of the fabric on the back side and then just yarn over and slip stitch. It does not need to be perfect. Sometimes I worry about things being perfect and I realize, no, done is better than perfect, and no one is going to care how your slip stitches were. And now we're back to stitches here, and we're going to work those stitches down through this part of the thumb, up and around the side of these stitches, and then once again just working along the edges of this top side, and then that creates this beautiful mitten. And then we'll just fasten off and weave in our ends, and that's it. How adorable is this pair? It's so cute. I think these are going to fit my nephew really soon. He is about to grow into these. They don't this season, the next season. But like I said, if the baby one definitely works better for him. His thumbs would not cooperate for me when I even tried to see if he was close to these ones. It was all about these cute baby ones without the thumb. And of course, we have them in several different sizes, so that you can make them for the whole family. They're really warm with these stitches and cozy to wear, and also very stylish. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and come back for more fun projects soon.